The rusty nail wasn't so much a ship as a collection of bad decisions and metal fatigue that somehow defied physics by holding together. Captain Jax Hargrave leaned against the console, a cigarette smoldering between his lips like a reluctant participant in a failed magic trick. Smoke curled up into the flickering lights, which added a certain ambience, if you were into that whole dying starship aesthetic. "Cap, I swear one day this heap's going to fall apart while we're still inside," muttered Thane, the engineer. He was a man of few words, mostly because he had a vocabulary as colorful as an asteroid belt and as useful as a screen door on a space shuttle. "Don't worry, Thane," Jax replied, puffing out a perfect ring of smoke. "You'll die doing what you love, swearing and fixing my mistakes." The ship's comms crackled with the subtlety of a drunk uncle at a wedding. "Captain," came the voice of Lyra, the ship's navigator and occasional voice of reason, "you might want to see this." Jax flicked his cigarette to the floor, ignoring the way it fizzled against the metal. He ambled over to the main screen where Lyra stood, arms crossed, looking like she was about to narrate a eulogy for common sense. The screen displayed a patch of space so empty it could have been a metaphor for Jax's bank account. Except for one thing, a ship, ghostly and silent, hanging in the void like a bad omen. "What's that?" Jax squinted at the derelict vessel, a hulking mass of metal and mystery. "That," Lyra said, her tone suggesting she was explaining basic arithmetic to a toddler, "is the Istria. Thought it was lost forever in the Forbidden Sector." "Forbidden Sector. Sounds like the title of a bad romance novel," Jax mused. "More like a horror story," Thane added, his voice a gravelly rumble from the engine room intercom. Jax scratched his chin. "Think there's anything valuable on it?" "Could be," Lyra replied. "Or it could just be a fancy coffin." "Well, only one way to find out," Jax said with a grin that suggested he had a penchant for bad ideas. As the rusty nail approached the Istria, the gravity of the situation, or lack thereof, became more apparent. The ship loomed like an ancient behemoth, its hull scarred by time and cosmic debris. Jax, never one for subtlety, decided this was the perfect time for a pep talk. "Listen up, you magnificent misfits," he announced over the ship's comms. "We're about to board what could be the biggest payday or the biggest mistake of our lives. So keep your eyes peeled, your wits sharp, and for the love of whatever gods watch over idiots like us, don't touch anything shiny." The crew gathered at the docking bay, a motley collection of humanity's finest rejects. There was Ree, the medic who had the bedside manner of a particularly grumpy porcupine, and Ezra, the tech specialist who could hack anything with a pulse or a plug. "All right, team," Jax said, slapping on his helmet. "Let's make history or die trying. Either way, it'll be one hell of a story." The airlock hissed open, welcoming them with all the warmth of an unmarked grave. The Istria was dark, silent, and about as inviting as a politician's smile. "Smells like something died in here," Ree muttered, wrinkling her nose. "Probably did," Ezra replied, his voice echoing in the hollow corridor. "Or worse, it's still alive." Jax led the way, his flashlight beam carving through the dust-laden air like a knife through mystery meat. He'd never admit it, but his heart was pounding harder than a drummer on speed. "Anyone else feel like we're being watched?" Thane asked, his usual bravado replaced by a hint of unease. "Just your guilty conscience," Ree quipped. "I'd say we should split up, but I've seen enough horror movies to know that's a bad idea," Lyra said, her sarcasm a welcome distraction from the creeping dread. The group moved deeper into the ship, their footsteps echoing ominously in the vast, empty corridors. They passed through long-abandoned rooms, each one filled with the ghosts of the past and the promise of a future that never came. "Here," Ezra said, stopping in front of a door that looked like it required a secret handshake and a password to open. "This looks important." Jax stepped forward, examining the console. "Think you can crack it?" Ezra grinned, pulling out a toolkit that could have doubled as a portable torture device. "Does a black hole suck?" Within minutes, the door slid open with a groan that sounded almost human. The room beyond was filled with alien technology, strange and otherworldly, glowing with an eerie light that promised both salvation and destruction. "What the hell is all this?" Jax muttered, stepping inside like a kid in a candy store filled with potentially lethal sweets. "Looks like something out of a conspiracy theorist's wet dream," Lyra said, eyes wide as she took in the sight. Ree scanned the room with her medical scanner, the device beeping in confusion. "Whatever it is, it's way beyond us." Thane rubbed his chin, his usual cynicism momentarily replaced by genuine awe. "Imagine the power something like this could hold." Jax's eyes gleamed with the kind of mischief usually reserved for cats and thieves, or the trouble it could cause. Ezra nodded, already poking at a particularly shiny panel. "This is either a gold mine or a death sentence," Jax shrugged. "Story of our lives, right?" But even as he spoke, a shiver ran down his spine, not unlike the one he felt when he realized he'd left the iron on at home, except this time it wasn't just his house at stake. Suddenly, alarms blared, a deafening cacophony that turned their thrill of discovery into a race for survival. The ship trembled beneath their feet as if trying to shake off unwelcome guests. "What did you touch?" Ree shouted, her voice barely audible over the noise. "Nothing," Ezra snapped back, hands raised in mock surrender. "Time to go," Jax ordered, retreating toward the door with a speed that suggested he'd left the oven on too, a particularly apt metaphor for the current situation. As they stumbled back through the corridors, the ship seemed to come alive, lights flickering with a malicious intent that suggested more than just a malfunction. "I think it's angry," Lyra commented, narrowly avoiding a falling panel. "Angry? It's a ship, not my ex-wife," Thane retorted, though his usual bravado was tinged with genuine fear. They reached the airlock just as the Astrea gave one final, ominous shudder. Jax ushered his crew through, sealing the door with a sense of relief that was short-lived. Back on the rusty nail, they watched through the viewport as the Astrea seemed to implode, collapsing in on itself with a soundless fury. "Well," Jax said, lighting another cigarette with hands that trembled ever so slightly. "That was fun. Who's up for round 2? The crew's collective glare could have melted asteroids." "Jax," Lyra said, her tone dripping with sarcasm, "next time you want to play treasure hunter, let's stick to something less likely to kill us, like dodging asteroids." Jax grinned, his eyes still fixed on the rapidly disintegrating ghost ship. "Where's the fun in that?" But even as he joked, the nagging thought lingered in the back of his mind. What had they stumbled upon, and what was it trying to hide? The Rusty Nails crew sat in the galley, nursing bruised egos and, in Thane's case, a literal bruise on his forehead courtesy of a rogue panel. Captain Jax Hargrave, ever the optimist, or perhaps just terminally reckless, was ruminating over the Astrea's recent implosion like it was a particularly bad blind date. So that was educational, Jax began, blowing a cloud of smoke that meandered toward the ceiling like it had nowhere better to be. "We've learned something today. Never trust a ghost ship that doesn't charge rent." Thane grunted, massaging his forehead. "Yeah, like never trust your sense of self-preservation." Ree, the medic, eyed him with the kind of sympathy reserved for people who'd put their hands in toasters. "You know, there's a good chance that bump might knock some sense into you. Stranger things have happened, like us still being alive." "Speaking of strange," Lyra interrupted, her fingers deftly tapping away at her data slate. "Those readings we picked up before we ran like hell, they're interesting." Ezra, ever the enthusiast even when common sense suggested otherwise, leaned in. "Interesting how?" "Like might make us rich interesting, or might make us dead interesting." Lyra glanced up, her expression one of cautious intrigue, a look usually reserved for strange alien artifacts and discount plasma grenades. "More on the might make us rich side, but it's a potential 2-for-1 deal." Jax leaned back, balancing his chair on 2 legs like some cosmic acrobat. "I like the sound of that." "Do tell. Remember that odd technology we stumbled upon? Turns out it was part of a defensive system," Lyra explained. "And surprise, surprise, hitting random buttons tends to activate such things." Ezra managed to look both sheepish and proud, a unique combination. "Hey, you said don't touch anything shiny. The damn thing was matte." Thane rolled his eyes. "Great, so what?" "We accidentally bumped into the self-destruct button of the universe's most paranoid spaceship." "Not quite," Lyra said, eyes glinting with something that could have been ambition or madness, likely both. "The system was designed to defend against, well, everything, and I mean everything. We're talking top-tier tech." "You mean like preventing us from looting its corpse?" Jax asked. "Exactly like that," Lyra confirmed. The Astrea was loaded with tech that could change the power dynamics out here. Shielding systems, weaponry, stuff that makes the Rusty Nail look like a tin can with delusions of grandeur. The rest of the crew exchanged looks that ranged from skepticism to outright greed, the kind of looks that have led countless fools to early graves or late-night infomercials. "So, what's the plan?" Ree asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "We go back and dig through the rubble. I'm sure the space vultures will love us for that." Jax grinned, a grin that suggested he was about to say something incredibly stupid. "We take what we learned and replicate it, or at least we try not to die trying." "Replicate it?" Thane snorted. "With what? Duct tape and wishful thinking. More like with Ezra's expertise and Lyra's navigation," Jax shot back. "If we can cobble together even a fraction of that tech, we'd be untouchable," Ree groaned. "Untouchable or just plain unhinged? Why not both?" Jax winked, flicking his cigarette into a nearby receptacle. "All right," Ezra clapped his hands, eager to launch into a project that would probably end in tears or explosions. "Let's get to work. First, we'll need a list of materials we can scavenge or hawk, and I'll need to make sure the ship doesn't fall apart while you're doing it," Thane muttered, though a hint of excitement crept into his tone. The challenge was irresistible, like a Rubik's Cube, if the cube could kill you. "Ree, you're on standby," Jax said, nodding toward the medic. "Just in case we end up needing emergency surgeries or, putting limbs back on." Ree smirked, a smirk that had seen too many limbs in too many wrong places. "Don't worry, I'll have the glue ready." "And Lyra," Jax continued, "keep us on course and out of trouble." Trouble us? Lyra shook her head, her usual dose of sarcasm firmly in place. Perish the thought. With the plan, or something resembling a plan, in motion, the crew dispersed to their various duties. The rusty nail hummed with activity, its usual creaks and groans now a backdrop to the frantic preparations. Jax found himself in the cockpit, staring out at the stars. Tiny pinpricks of light flared and died in the blackness, a never-ending reminder of the vastness they navigated and the nothingness that threatened to swallow them whole. Thinking deep thoughts, Captain? Lyra asked, sliding into the seat next to him. Thinking shallow ones, actually, Jax admitted. Like where my next drink is coming from. Lyra chuckled, a sound that held more warmth than the rusty nail had seen in a while. You know, surviving that ghost ship was something. Yeah, Jax agreed, though his eyes were distant, focused on some point far beyond the metal and wires. Makes you wonder what else is out there. Probably more things that want to kill us, Lyra replied, deadpan. True, Jax chuckled, but maybe also something worth finding. Silence settled between them, a companionable quiet that spoke louder than words. It was the kind of moment where optimism dared to creep in, only to be shooed away by the grim reality that accompanied life aboard the rusty nail. Back in engineering, Thane and Ezra were elbow-deep in wires and circuitry, exchanging insults like some people exchanged greetings. Careful with that, Thane warned, watching as Ezra poked at something that sizzled ominously. We're trying to build a defense system, not a barbecue. Relax, Ezra said, though he did ease off the pressure. I got this. Famous last words, Thane muttered, but there was a grudging respect in his tone. He couldn't deny Ezra's skills, even if he wanted to throttle him half the time. Meanwhile, Ree was in the medbay organizing supplies that might soon be in high demand. She hummed a tune that was half nostalgia, half distraction, as she checked and rechecked the inventory. Ree, how's it looking? Jax's voice crackled through the intercom. Better than your face, Captain, she replied without missing a beat. We're ready for anything from scrapes to decapitations. Let's hope it's more of the former. Let's hope, Jax echoed, though they both knew hope was a luxury few aboard the rusty nail could afford. With every hour that passed, the ship became a hive of activity. Plans were drawn, materials were scavenged, and tempers flared only to be smoothed over by mutual necessity. Finally, the crew gathered again, tired but fueled by a shared purpose, or maybe just the promise of a payday that might not end in a court-martial. All right, folks, Jax said, looking around at the faces that had become as familiar as his own reflection in a cracked mirror. This is it. We've got one shot at this, so let's make it count. Or at least make it loud, Thane added with a grin that was half bravado, half exhaustion. Ezra held up a small device, a prototype of the tech they hoped to replicate. This should, in theory, give us the shielding capabilities we saw on the Astrea, or it might turn the ship inside out. Nice to have options, Lyra noted dryly. Ree just sighed. Just promise me I won't have to perform surgery on anyone while they're upside down. No promises, Jax replied, his eyes twinkling with the kind of mischief that usually preceded disaster. But I guarantee it'll be one hell of a ride. With a collective breath that felt more like a shared dive into the unknown, the crew set to their tasks. It was do or die, again, but they wouldn't have had it any other way. The rusty nail trembled under the weight of their ambition, or maybe it was just sick of their nonsense. Either way, it surged forward into the void, a ragtag band of misfits chasing a dream that might just kill them. But as Jax leaned back, puffing on a fresh cigarette, he couldn't help but smile. It wasn't the destination that mattered, or even the potential death awaiting them at every turn. It was the journey, the camaraderie, and the never-ending quest for something more than just survival. It was about defying the odds, laughing in the face of danger, and flipping the bird to the universe at large. And if they made it out alive, well, that was just icing on the cake, or perhaps, knowing their luck, arsenic. The rusty nail shook like an intergalactic maraca, emitting noises that suggested it was either about to achieve warp speed or spontaneously disassemble. In engineering, Thane and Ezra were hunched over the newly replicated tech, their faces set in expressions of determination, or maybe constipation. It was hard to tell in the flickering light of the failing overheads. Remind me why we're doing this again, Ezra asked, his voice barely audible over the grating sound of metal on metal. Thane grunted, poking at a panel that spat sparks like it was auditioning for a fireworks show. Because we're idiots, or is it because someone waved the prospect of untold riches in front of us like a carrot in front of a particularly foolish donkey? Ezra chuckled, though the sound was tinged with nerves. Both, I reckon. But mostly the donkey bit. Outside the cramped engineering bay, the rest of the crew was doing what they did best, pretending they weren't about to embark on a mission that stood a better chance of ending in disaster than success. Jax was in the cockpit, feet up on the console, as he fiddled with a half-empty flask that clanked ominously as the ship shuddered. Lyra sat beside him, eyes glued to a data slate that seemed to be displaying an endless stream of numbers, none of which boded well. Still think this is a good idea? Jax asked, casting a sideways glance at Lyra. He twirled the flask like a baton, probably less for effect and more because he'd already had a few swigs. Lyra snorted, not bothering to look up. Define good. If you mean in the I'd love to live to see tomorrow sense, then no. If you mean hey, at least it'll look cool in the history books maybe. History books, Jax laughed. More like cautionary tales. There was a brief pause as they both contemplated the likelihood of meeting their end in a spectacularly stupid manner. It wasn't exactly an unfamiliar feeling aboard the Rusty Nail. Suddenly an alarm blared, a shrill, insistent sound that promised nothing good. In engineering, Thane's head jerked up like a startled prairie dog's. What the hell did you do, Ezra? Me? Ezra protested, scrambling to check the console readouts. I was following the plan. Well, the plan's clearly got a few holes in it, like Swiss cheese or my faith in humanity, Thane retorted. Ree's voice crackled over the intercom, dripping with a kind of exasperation that suggested she'd been expecting this all along. What's going on down there? Are we about to become space dust, or do I have time to finish my sandwich? Ezra's fingers flew across the controls, trying to shut off the alarm. Give me a second, Ree, just a. There was a sudden whir, a flash of light, and then silence. The alarm cut off, leaving a ringing in everyone's ears and a sense of foreboding that settled like an unwelcome guest. Guys, Lyra's voice came through, tinged with something between concern and the realization they might have just stepped in it. I think we might have sent out a signal. Jax raised an eyebrow. A signal. Like a come and get us invitation, more like a look at us. We're meddling in things we don't understand, beacon, Lyra sighed. And guess what? Something's answering. In the span of a heartbeat, every ounce of humor evaporated. The crew had been in tight spots before, but the prospect of an alien faction taking an interest in their little science project was more than a bit unnerving. So what do we do now? Ezra asked, trying to keep the panic from his voice and failing miserably. Hope they're friendly, Thane suggested, though his expression said he wasn't holding out any hope. Jax was already on his feet, all traces of levity gone. Lyra, how long do we have? She glanced at her slate, tapping at it with a finger that had suddenly started to twitch. Not long. Maybe an hour if they decide to mosey on over. Great, Jax muttered, rubbing his temples as if trying to massage some sense into his skull. So we've got about 60 minutes to cobble together a defense or figure out how to kiss our asses goodbye. Or both, Thane added, because optimism was for people who didn't live on the edge. Reappeared in the doorway, arms crossed. I've got the medbay prepped. Just in case things go, spectacularly wrong. They never go wrong, Jax replied with the kind of deadpan delivery that suggested otherwise. They just go sideways, upside down, inside out, Ree shrugged. It's all perspective, right? Jax smirked, but it was the kind of smirk that spoke of impending doom. All right, let's get this ship ready for a visit from the galaxy's worst welcoming committee. The Rusty Nail turned into a hive of frantic activity. Thane and Ezra went back to tinkering with everything they could get their hands on, muttering curses that would have made any sailor proud. Lyra recalibrated the sensors, hoping to glean any information about their potential visitors, while Jax plotted the least suicidal course of action. True to their expectations, 60 minutes later, an alien ship loomed on the horizon, sleek and menacing like a cosmic shark smelling blood. It didn't take a genius to figure out that whoever was on board wasn't here for cordial introductions and space tea. Jax stared at the viewscreen, the approaching ship reflected in his eyes. Well, they look friendly like a cactus, Thane muttered. Cactus might be preferable, Ezra added, his voice laced with tension as he adjusted the shields. At least they don't shoot back. There was a silence, thick with anticipation. The kind of silence that clung to their skin and seeped into their bones. A silence that was about to be shattered. So what now? Ree asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. We do what we do best, Jax replied, settling into his chair. There was a resigned determination in his tone, the kind that said they'd come too far to back down now. We wing it, and if winging it doesn't work, Lyra asked, her fingers dancing over the console as she tried to find some advantage in a situation that offered none. Then we die spectacularly, Jax grinned, though the humor didn't quite reach his eyes. And isn't that all we can really ask for? With nothing more than hope and a touch of madness, the Rusty Nail surged forward. It was a tin can against a juggernaut, but it was their tin can. If they were going down, they'd do it their way. Loud, proud, and flipping the universe the bird, the alien ship's weapons began to charge, a menacing glow that promised destruction. The crew braced themselves, each one silently accepting the role they played in this cosmic tragedy. Ezra gripped the controls, his knuckles white. Well, it's been a pleasure, folks. Likewise, Thane replied, his voice steady even as the ship trembled. Ree chuckled, the sound absurdly carefree considering the circumstances. At least I won't have to restock the medbay. Always a silver lining, Lyra agreed, adjusting the sensors for what felt like the 100th time. The alien ship loomed ever closer, an unstoppable force bearing down on their ramshackle vessel. But the crew of the Rusty Nail had faced impossible odds before and somehow come out the other side. Maybe they were too stubborn to die, or maybe just too stupid to know when to quit. Jax took a deep breath, his hands resting on the controls. All right, let's give them hell. And with that, they charged forward, a ragtag band of misfits against the might of an interstellar power. It was a fool's errand, a suicide mission dressed in bravado and desperation. But it was theirs, and they wouldn't have had it any other way. As the first shots rang out, lighting up the void with deadly beauty, Jax Hargrave did the unthinkable. He laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that echoed through the ship, defiant and reckless. Because in that moment, facing down the end of everything, it was the only thing left to do, and just maybe it was enough. The alien ship loomed closer, a hulking silhouette against the backdrop of space, like a cosmic debt collector with a grudge. The crew of the Rusty Nail stared at the screen, expressions ranging from worried to downright terrified. Jax cleared his throat. All right, folks, looks like they're here for the tech. Any ideas other than surrender or play dead? Lyra didn't even look up from her console, her fingers flying over the keys. We could try the universally recognized gesture of friendship. Jax raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Mooning them, she replied dryly. Could work, Thane chimed in, eyes fixed on a panel that was currently trying to decide between keeping them alive or exploding spectacularly. Might confuse them long enough for us to get our act together, or it'll just piss them off, Ezra added, adjusting his glasses and shaking his head, which seems to be our specialty. Ree stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a bemused look on her face. Well, we can always use my medbay just in case they decide to play rough, Ezra snorted. Oh sure, we'll just patch ourselves up while they're busy turning us into space dust. The Rusty Nail shuddered ominously, as if emphasizing the point. It was a creaky, unreliable piece of junk, but it was their creaky, unreliable piece of junk, and if they were going down, they'd go down swinging. Let's try talking first, Jax suggested, adjusting the comms with a flick of his wrist. See if they've got any sense of humor. Lyra shot him a look. We really betting on humor to save us? Got any better ideas? Not unless we grow wings and fly out of here, she muttered, turning back to her console. The screen flickered and a visage appeared, an alien, blue-skinned and with eyes like black marbles. It didn't speak, not with words anyway, but its disapproval was clear enough. Greetings, Jax said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. I'm Captain Jax Hargrave of the Rusty Nail. We, seem to have something you want. The alien tilted its head, a motion that could have been curiosity or the alien equivalent of rolling its eyes. A series of metallic clicks followed, and then a voice cold and mechanical filled the cabin. Return the technology. Straight to the point, Thane whispered. I like their style, Jax nodded. Yes, about that. We kind of, found it by accident. We're all for returning it if you tell us how. Disassemble it and eject it into space, the voice commanded, as if they hadn't just asked for the mechanical equivalent of disarming a nuclear bomb with a toothpick. Ezra looked at the tech, then at Thane. You think we can do that? Thane stared at the panel, which was now cheerfully sparking again. Sure, if we want to blow up the Rusty Nail and half the galaxy while we're at it. Sounds like a plan, Ree quipped. I've always wanted to go out with a bang. Bang's an understatement, Ezra muttered, adjusting his glasses again. Jax turned back to the screen. Would you consider an alternative? Like say not blowing us to smithereens. You will comply, the voice said, without the slightest hint of negotiation or humor. Lyra sighed. Well, I guess they're not here for space tea. More like space eviction, Thane said, running a hand through his hair. Guess we're squatters in the wrong neighborhood. The alien ship, growing ever more ominous, began to power up its weapons systems. The lights on the Rusty Nail flickered in response, as if the ship itself was aware of its impending doom. Jax drummed his fingers on his chair, mind racing. All right, let's stall them. We can't disassemble this thing without frying ourselves, but maybe we can convince them we're trying. Stall them with what, an interpretative dance? Ezra asked, half jokingly but mostly serious. Got any better ideas? Ezra shrugged. No, but interpretive dance sounds dangerous enough to work. We could always improvise, Ree suggested. We're good at that. Improvising is what got us into this mess, Lyra pointed out. And maybe it's the only thing that'll get us out, Jax countered. All right, let's give it a shot. The crew went to work, each member doing their best to look busy and competent. It was a performance, a last-ditch act that had all the polish of a high school play but none of the structure. Thane and Ezra fiddled with the tech, muttering about containment fields and radiation spikes. Rechecked and rechecked her med supplies, though her eyes never strayed far from the screen. Lyra kept scanning the data, searching for any weakness in the alien systems. Jax tried to project an aura of calm confidence, though it was hard to keep up with the ship rattling like a soda can in a tumble dryer. The alien voice cut through the ship again, sounding even more impatient. You have 30 minutes, 30 minutes, Thane exclaimed, looking up with an expression that was equal parts horror and incredulity. We can't even make a decent cup of coffee in 30 minutes. Guess we're not inviting them over for brunch, Ezra replied, tapping at the controls with increased fervor. All right, we need a plan and fast, Jack said, trying to contain the growing panic in his voice. Don't worry, I've got one, Lyra announced, a slight smirk playing on her lips. It's risky, but it's all we've got. Let's hear it, Jax replied, leaning forward with a mix of desperation and curiosity. Lyra glanced over her shoulder, her eyes glinting with determination. We overload the newly replicated tech, send out a feedback pulse through the aliens' own systems, and hope it fries their mainframe. Hope, Thane echoed, raising an eyebrow. That's a hell of a gamble. Got anything better? Lyra countered, her expression daring anyone to come up with an alternative. Silence settled over the cabin, the tension thick as smog. Each member of the crew weighed the risks, knowing that failure meant certain doom. Jax exhaled slowly, a resigned grin spreading across his face. All right, let's do it. If we're going out, let's make it one hell of a show. The crew sprang into action, working with a frenetic energy that bordered on madness. Ezra and Thane tinkered with the tech, adjusting settings, recalibrating outputs, and cursing under their breath as sparks flew. Make sure everyone's prepped, Jax instructed, his voice low and urgent. Already on it, replied, distributing emergency kits and double-checking everyone's gear. Lyra, keep an eye on their systems. We need to know the second we have an opening. Got it, Lyra said, her focus razor-sharp as she monitored the alien ship's data streams. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness, each second a reminder of how close they were to the end. The rusty nail groaned and shuddered, its very structure protesting the strain. Almost there, Ezra announced, his voice a mix of relief and anxiety. Just a few more tweaks. Make it quick, Jax urged, casting a glance at the alien ship. Its weapons systems were glowing ominously, ready to unleash devastation at a moment's notice. Finally, the tech was ready, the crew poised on the knife's edge of disaster. Jax took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. All right, here goes nothing, he said, his hand hovering over the control panel. With a flick of his wrist, he activated the pulse, a surge of energy that crackled through the rusty nail like a live wire. The ship shuddered violently, lights flickering as the feedback wave raced towards the alien vessel. Come on, Lyra muttered, her eyes glued to the screen as she tracked the pulse's progress. The alien ship's systems flared, a cascade of sparks erupting from its hull like fireworks. The crew held their breath, waiting for the outcome of their desperate gamble. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the alien ship's lights dimmed, its weapon systems powering down in a cascade of failure. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief, their tension evaporating like morning mist. They are offline, Lyra announced, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. We did it, Thane said, a disbelieving laugh escaping his lips. Ezra slumped back in his chair, exhaustion etched into his features. I can't believe that actually worked. Ree shook her head, a rueful smile on her face. Let's not make a habit of this, all right, Jax chuckled, the sound filled with a mix of relief and incredulity. Agreed, but damn, if that wasn't one for the history books. The crew of the Rusty Nail shared a moment of silent camaraderie, their bond forged anew in the crucible of near disaster. They had faced the impossible and come out the other side, bruised but unbroken. As the alien ship drifted aimlessly, its threat neutralized, Jax allowed himself a moment of reflection. They had survived by the skin of their teeth, but the galaxy was vast and unforgiving. There would be more challenges, more dangers lurking in the void, but for now they had earned a brief respite, a chance to catch their breath and savor their hard-won victory. All right, let's get the hell out of here, Jax said, a determined gleam in his eye. Next stop, anywhere but here. And with that, the Rusty Nail powered up its engines, turning away from the alien ship and setting a course for the unknown. It was a small victory in a universe full of peril, but it was theirs, and it was enough, for now. The Rusty Nail rattled through space with all the grace of a drunk stumbling out of a bar at closing time. Jax Hargrave sat in his captain's chair, the leather cracked and worn like an old pair of boots. He glanced around at his motley crew, each of them absorbed in their own tasks, mostly pretending they had a plan beyond try not to die. All right, people, Jax announced, cracking his knuckles with an enthusiasm he didn't quite feel. We've managed to piss off an alien race that could turn us into space dust with a sneeze. What's next on the agenda? Thane, elbows deep in a panel that was sparking ominously, didn't even bother looking up. I'm thinking margaritas on a beach planet, but I'll settle for not exploding. Lyra snorted from her console. Pragmatic as always, Thane. Ezra adjusted his glasses, squinting at a readout that displayed more warnings than a doomsday cult's bulletin board. Did I mention this tech is more likely to implode spectacularly than work as intended? I figured that was a given, Jax replied, leaning back and pretending the chair wasn't about to collapse under him. But thanks for the reminder. Ree leaned against the medbay door, arms crossed, a sardonic twist to her lips. I'll stock up on the burn cream then, shall I? We might need more than burn cream if this goes sideways, Thane muttered, finally pulling his head out of the panel. He looked like he'd had a close encounter with a porcupine made of wires. Just keep fiddling with those buttons, Jax instructed. Preferably the ones that prevent us from becoming space shrapnel. The alien ship was still out there, silent and foreboding, like a shark patiently circling a wounded seal. Jax knew they were running out of time, options, and luck. If there was one thing the universe excelled at, it was delivering crushing existential dread with a side of sarcasm. All right, let's recap, Jax said, trying to sound like he had even the faintest clue what he was doing. We've got aliens demanding their tech back, a ship held together by sheer stubbornness, and a plan that involves hoping they have a power outage. Lyra rolled her eyes. Can't we just send them a fruit basket and call it a day? Sure, if you think intergalactic peace treaties can be signed with kiwis and bananas, Ezra quipped, fingers dancing over his console. The ship shuddered again, as if it too was tired of the conversation. Maybe it was trying to tell them something like, get off me, or find a real job. All right, crew, buckle up, Jax announced, injecting a note of false bravado into his voice. We're about to do what we do best, make it up as we go along. Favorite part of the job, Thane said, sarcasm dripping from his words like battery acid. Right up there with being shot at. The plan, or what passed for one, was simple in its stupidity. Overload the tech they'd accidentally stolen and hope the resulting chaos would confuse the aliens long enough for them to make a run for it. Easy, right? Just like juggling chainsaws while blindfolded. Ree, make sure the medbay's ready, Jax instructed, eyeing the alien ship warily. I get the feeling we're gonna need it. Optimism, Captain, Ree replied, smirking. That's what I like about you. One of many qualities, Jax grinned, though the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. All right, everyone ready. I was born ready, Lyra said, her fingers poised over the controls. Or at least I pretend to be. Ezra shook his head, adjusting his glasses again. Let's just make sure this doesn't end with us as cosmic roadkill. Thane hit a few buttons, and the rusty nail let out a groan that was probably its way of protesting the abuse. Let's hope this works, because I'm out of ideas. And duct tape. The alien ship loomed larger, its weapon systems a menacing presence on the periphery of their sensors. Jax could feel the tension in the air, a palpable weight pressing down on them all. Okay, here goes nothing, he said, hitting the activation button with a flourish that was more for show than anything else. The tech hummed to life, the lights flickering as the ship absorbed the load. Sparks flew, and the rusty nail shuddered like it was about to come apart at the seams. Steady, Jax muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The hum grew louder, an angry wasp nest of energy building to a crescendo. Jax could feel the vibrations through his seat, each one a reminder of how close they were to catastrophe. Almost there, Thane said, his voice tight with concentration. Just a little more. Sounds like you're working on a souffle, not a life-or-death situation, Lyra remarked, keeping an eye on the alien ship's movements. Hey, I like a good souffle, Thane shot back, especially if it doesn't kill me. The alien ship began to power up again, a shimmering glow enveloping its hull. Jax's stomach did a flip-flop worthy of a gymnastics routine. Time for the fireworks, folks, Jax said, his hand poised over the final switch. With a flick, he sent the overloaded pulse racing toward the alien vessel. The rusty nail bucked violently, throwing Jax against the restraints and eliciting a chorus of grunts and curses from the crew. The feedback pulse hit the alien ship, and for a moment nothing happened. Jax held his breath, his heart pounding like a tribal drum. Then one by one, the lights on the alien vessel began to flicker and die, its systems shutting down in a rapid cascade of failure. The crew let out a collective breath they hadn't realized they'd been holding. We did it, Ezra said, disbelief mingled with relief. For now, Ree chimed in, ever the voice of caution. Let's not get cocky, Jax grinned, a manic edge to the expression. Cocky is all I've got left. With the alien threat temporarily neutralized, the rusty nail's engines roared to life, pushing them away from the disabled ship. Jax felt a swell of triumph, tempered by the knowledge that their victory was a temporary reprieve at best. As they sped away into the void, Jax allowed himself a moment to relax, the adrenaline ebbing away like a receding tide. Next time, Lyra said, breaking the silence, let's avoid the whole imminent destruction thing, yeah. No promises, Jax replied, the thrill of survival still coursing through his veins. But I'll try. The crew settled back into their routines, the familiar chaos of the rusty nail a welcome return to normalcy. They had survived by the thinnest of margins, a fact that wasn't lost on any of them. All right, people, Jax said, glancing around at his crew with a renewed sense of appreciation. Let's find somewhere to lay low for a bit. We could use a break, Thane nodded, already plotting a course on his console. I've heard there's a nice little dive bar on Orion's belt. Cheap drinks, live music, and no one asks questions. Sounds like my kind of place, Ree said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. As long as they have decent coffee, Ezra added, still tapping away at his console. Lyra, you in? Jax asked, turning to the woman who'd become his right hand through sheer force of personality. She shrugged, a mischievous glint in her eye. Wherever we go, trouble's sure to follow, but at least it's never boring. That's the spirit, Jax said, feeling a warmth that was entirely unrelated to the ship's overworked heating system. The rusty nail sped through the cosmos, its future as uncertain as ever but filled with a sense of possibility. For now, they were alive together and ready to face whatever the universe decided to throw at them next. After all, they'd faced worse odds before and come out laughing. With a crew like this, Jax thought anything was possible, even surviving the next 24 hours. The rusty nail lurched through space like a drunken sailor, still vibrating from its last close shave with cosmic doom. Jax Hargrave, Captain Extraordinaire, or so he liked to tell himself every time he managed to steer them away from another disaster, sat in his captain's chair like a king on a very wobbly throne. Okay, folks, Jax began, his voice a mix of weariness and forced enthusiasm. We've managed to give our alien friends the slip, but we can't exactly bank on them staying offline forever. Thane, still nursing the panel he'd been wrestling with, gave a dry laugh. Yeah, and I'm sure they'll send us a nice thank you note for the power outage, maybe even a fruit basket. With kiwis, Lyra added, her eyes fixed on her console. Intergalactic peace, one fruit at a time. Ezra, ever the skeptic, pushed his glasses up his nose and frowned at a holographic display. While we're joking about exotic fruit diplomacy, might I remind everyone we need to figure out how their tech even works, and preferably without it blowing up in our faces. Always the optimist, Ezra, re-quipped, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. Her perpetual smirk never wavered, not even when the universe was actively trying to kill them. Hey, someone's gotta be the realist around here, Ezra shot back. Jack sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. All right, so we need to not only understand this tech but make it work for us. Suggestions? Thane perked up, a gleam of mischief in his eye. Well, we could try turn it off and back on again. It's the universal solution. Yeah, right after hit it with a hammer, Lyra added, her fingers deftly flying over her controls. Both solid strategies, Jax agreed with a nod, but maybe we need something a little more creative. The rusty nail, it seemed, had had enough of their procrastination. The ship shuddered again, a reminder that time was not on their side. All right, Thane muttered, rolling his eyes as he returned to his sparking panel. Let's see what these alien gizmos can do when we shake him up a bit. He and Ezra dove into the tech like kids picking apart a particularly stubborn puzzle. A mess of wires, circuits, and what might have been a hamster wheel for all anyone knew, lay sprawled out in front of them. I doubt they came with a user manual, Ezra said, sounding more than a little disappointed. If they did, it's probably in a language that would make your brain dribble out of your ears, Thane replied, twisting a screwdriver with more hope than skill. Ree watched from her perch, eyebrows raised. Let me know when you find the Make Aliens Go Away button. Working on it, Thane said, glancing up with a grin that was more manic than reassuring. Jax, in his infinite wisdom, decided now was a good time to hover. So, any progress, or should I start composing a ballad about our heroic demise? Ezra snorted. Not unless it involves a lot of swearing and frantic button pressing. Could be a hit, Lyra chimed in, still absorbed in her own task. I hear chaos is all the rage in the music scene these days. A few more minutes of tinkering and Thane's eyes lit up. Wait a minute, I think I've got something. Good something, or we're all gonna die something, Jax asked, deciding it was a valid question under the circumstances. Depends on your definition of good, Thane replied. He gestured at a mess of alien circuitry that now glowed with an ominous green light. This thing here, it's like a shield, but it can also reflect energy back at its source. I detect a but in there somewhere, Ree said, her tone as dry as the deserts of Mars. But, Thane confirmed, it's unstable. Could protect us, could turn us into a very brief fireworks display. Great, Jack said, clapping his hands together. Sounds like exactly the kind of half-baked plan we specialize in. Let's give it a shot. Figured you'd say that, Ezra muttered, not unkindly. The crew gathered around, a motley collection of skeptics, dreamers, and those caught somewhere between. The rusty nail hummed with a low, jittery rhythm, as if it too had its doubts about the whole affair. So we activate this thing, Jack summarized, and hope it turns us from sitting ducks into something more resembling, well, not sitting ducks. That's the spirit, Lyra said, unable to hide her grin. All right then, Jax decided. Let's see if we can teach these aliens a thing or two about human ingenuity, or at least our surprising knack for not dying. With a series of quick adjustments, Thane and Ezra activated the shield. The alien tech flared to life, casting an eerie glow over the bridge. I feel like we're standing inside a disco ball, Ree deadpanned, eyes scanning the shifting lights. Let's hope it's not our last dance, Jax said, trying for levity and almost succeeding. The alien ship was out there, no doubt rebooting systems and getting ready for round 2. Jax could almost picture the aliens scratching their heads or whatever passed for heads, trying to figure out how their prey had managed to slip away. Okay, everyone, Jax said, his voice a touch steadier than he felt. Prepare for some retaliatory action. Lyra, keep your eyes on their weapon systems. Already on it, she replied, her focus sharper than ever. The rusty nail powered up, its engines giving a throaty roar that was hopefully more impressive than ominous. The alien ship appeared on their sensors, a hulking shadow that promised nothing but trouble. Incoming, Ezra said, watching the alien ship's energy signature spike. Jax swallowed hard. All right, let's test this fancy new shield of yours. Thane, how's it holding? So far, so good, Thane replied, though his fingers hovered nervously over the controls. But I wouldn't start planning a victory parade just yet. The alien ship fired, a brilliant beam of energy slicing through the void, aimed straight for the rusty nail. Here we go, Jax murmured, gripping the arms of his chair. The shield absorbed the hit, the rusty nail shuddering but holding firm. Energy crackled along the shield's surface, and with a pulse it sent the attack spiraling back toward the alien ship. Ha, Lyra exclaimed, watching the spectacle unfold. Take that, you oversized space bullies. The feedback struck the alien vessel, causing a cascade of explosions along its hull. It was far from a knockout blow, but it was enough to give the aliens pause. For once something went right, Ree said, shaking her head in disbelief. Jax allowed himself a brief moment of triumph, a grin spreading across his face. Not bad for a rusty old bucket, eh? Ezra gave a rare smile. Don't get cocky, Captain. They've still got plenty of tricks up their proverbial sleeves. Yeah, and we've got this, Jax said, gesturing to their makeshift shield. Figured out anything else, Thane? Thane shook his head, his expression apologetic. I'm working on it, but this tech is like trying to read a book in a language you barely know. Well, keep at it, Jax encouraged. The more we understand it, the better our chances. The alien ship regrouped, their systems reactivating with a vengeance. Jax felt the tension coil in his gut, a familiar companion on their many misadventures. Any bright ideas on how we can keep this up? Lyra asked, her eyes never leaving her console. Work in progress, Thane said, a wry smile tugging at his lips. We could try talking to them, Ree suggested, though her tone left little doubt about her opinion of that option. Yeah, right after we ask them over for tea and cookies, Ezra replied, his sarcasm cutting through the tension. The alien ship fired again, this time with a salvo of energy blasts. The rusty nail's shield absorbed and reflected each one in turn, their ship holding steady against the onslaught. They're getting smarter, Jax observed, his mind racing with possibilities and the lack thereof. We need to be quicker, Ezra nodded, his analytical mind already working overtime. We could try overloading the shield, send a bigger pulse back their way. Sounds risky, Ree pointed out. Like everything else we do, Jax said, a wry smile on his face. Let's give it a shot. With careful precision, Thane and Ezra adjusted the controls, channeling more energy into the alien tech. The shield pulsed with increased intensity, a beacon of defiance in the vast emptiness of space. Ready? Jax asked, glancing at his crew. Ready, they replied, a chorus of determination and shared insanity. Jax nodded, his heart pounding. All right, let's show them what the rusty nail can do. The alien ship launched another attack, the energy beam streaking towards them like a cosmic predator. But this time the rusty nail was more than just prey. The enhanced shield absorbed the hit, the energy crackling and building until it reached a crescendo. With a final, decisive pulse, the shield unleashed its stored power, a blinding flash that tore through space. The feedback struck the alien ship with devastating force, a series of explosions rippling along its hull. Systems shorted out, lights flickered, and for a moment the ship seemed to waver in the void. Holy hell, Lyra breathed, eyes wide. We did it, Ezra said, almost disbelieving. For now, Ree reminded them gently. Jax exhaled, a wave of relief crashing over him. Not bad for a bunch of misfits. The rusty nail had turned the tide, however, briefly, and the crew basked in their hard-won victory. Jax knew they weren't out of the woods yet, but they'd bought themselves precious time. All right, crew, Jax said, his voice filled with newfound confidence. Let's see if we can make this advantage stick. With the alien threat temporarily subdued, the rusty nail set a course away from their adversaries, engines roaring defiantly into the cosmos. Next stop, not dying, Jax announced, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like more than just a hopeful wish. The rusty nail coasted through the void, a battered tin can propelled by a heady mix of stubborn optimism and sheer recklessness. Captain Jax Hargrave lounged in the captain's chair, or more accurately, the chair he had claimed due to its proximity to the coffee maker, eyeballing the crew with a scrutiny that suggested either deep contemplation or an impending nap. "All right, team," Jax announced, clapping his hands as if to awaken himself. "We're in a bit of a pickle, more like an asteroid belt of shit," Lyra interjected without glancing up from her console, her fingers dancing across controls like a pianist hammering out a particularly angry sonata. "Poetic as always, Lyra," Jax replied, unfazed, "but we've got a potential ace up our sleeve now. That shield did a number on our alien friends, and if we play it right, we might just turn this tech into the biggest middle finger humanity's ever given." Thane, engineering grease smeared across his forehead like a badge of honor, chimed in, "Assuming it doesn't blow us to smithereens first. This stuff is about as stable as a two-legged stool." Ezra leaned back, a thoughtful frown on his face. "We could try reverse engineering the tech, see if we can't find a way to turn their own weapons against them, though given our track record, it'll probably end up doing the Machina instead," Reese snorted. "Wouldn't be the weirdest thing we've done. Remember the time we had to do the Kangal line to keep that reactor stable?" Jax waved a hand. "Best not to dwell on past lunacy. We're all about the future lunacy here." "Thane, can you get any more juice out of that shield? Not unless you want to start sacrificing systems. I mean, we could reroute power from life support, but breathing tends to be high on the list of crew priorities." "Weird how that works," Lyra murmured, still focused on her console. Jax shrugged. "All right, let's keep life support where it is, but we need more than a shield, we need a fence. Something that packs a punch like, a punch to the throat," Ezra supplied helpfully. "The kind that makes you regret ever having a throat." "Exactly," Jax said, nodding approvingly. "Suggestions? We could try an overload," Thane suggested, his voice carrying a hint of mischief. "Crank everything up to 11, see what shakes loose." "That sounds safe," Reese said dryly. "And by safe I mean suicidal. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense," Jax said, adopting a mock-wisdom tone. "Or in our case, the best defense is a very, very unstable defense." "Are we sure we're not the villains here?" Lyra asked, finally looking up. "I mean, we are using their own stuff against them. Kind of rude when you think about it," Jax grinned. "If we're the villains, we're the kind that walks away from explosions without looking back." Ezra leaned forward, an idea forming. "If we can get close enough, we could use the shield tech as a sort of battering ram. Hit them with everything we've got and hope it scrambles their systems beyond repair. Like a cosmic sucker punch," Thane said, his eyes lighting up with the prospect of chaos. "I like it," recrossed her arms, her expression skeptical. "And if it doesn't work, then we go out in a blaze of glory," Jax replied with a shrug, his grin unwavering. "Not a bad way to be remembered." The crew exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them. It was a terrible plan which made it perfectly suited to their skills. "All right," Jax said, clapping his hands again. "Let's prep for the most questionable maneuver we've ever attempted," which is saying something, Thane remarked, already moving to adjust the controls. As the crew set to work, the rusty nail shuddered, its systems protesting the increased demands. Lights flickered, panels hissed, and for a brief moment, it seemed as if the ship would simply give up and implode out of sheer exasperation. "Okay, everyone," Jax called, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with doing something monumentally stupid. "Let's show these aliens what happens when you mess with a bunch of scrappy humans with nothing left to lose." The alien vessel loomed ahead, a menacing silhouette against the backdrop of stars. Jax felt the weight of the moment, the odds stacked against them like a house built on quicksand. "Throttle to full," Jax ordered, his voice steady. "Let's close the gap." The rusty nail shot forward, engines roaring like a defiant beast. The alien ship responded, its weapon systems flaring to life, but Jax had no intention of giving them an easy target. "Steady," he murmured, eyes fixed on the alien ship. "Steady." The distance closed rapidly, the void shrinking as the rusty nail barreled towards its prey. Jax could see the alien ship's defenses activating, a glittering array of energy fields and weapon arrays poised to strike. "Now," Jax shouted, and Thane activated the shield, the alien tech crackling with energy as it surged to life. The shield flared, a brilliant cocoon of light that enveloped the rusty nail, absorbing and redirecting the alien firepower with reckless abandon. Jax could feel the ship vibrate beneath him, the very air humming with tension as they hurtled forward. "Here goes nothing," Ree murmured, her grip tightening on her console. The impact was cataclysmic, the rusty nail slamming into the alien ship with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball. The shield discharged its energy in a wild pulse, a chaotic burst that overwhelmed the alien systems and plunged their ship into darkness. "Yes," Lyra exclaimed, her laughter edged with disbelief. "We did it." Ezra leaned back, his expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Well, that worked better than expected. Nice not to die for a change." Jax exhaled, the tension bleeding away. "All right, let's not get complacent. We've got a window of opportunity here. Time to secure that tech and get the hell out of Dodge before they figure out what just hit them." The crew moved quickly, each member a vital cog in the chaotic machine that was their operation. With the alien ship disabled, they had the upper hand, however fleeting it might be. "Let's grab what we can," Jack said, his voice filled with a renewed sense of purpose. We earned this victory, however improbable it might be. The crew worked swiftly, scavenging the alien tech with the kind of fervor usually reserved for Black Friday sales. Thane and Ezra led the charge, their expertise invaluable as they stripped the alien systems of anything useful. "Get what you can," Jax urged, keeping a wary eye on the alien ship. Before they reboot and decide to get cranky, as the rusty nails hold filled with alien tech, Jax felt a sense of accomplishment, tempered by the knowledge that their victory was far from secure. They had struck a blow, but the battle was far from over. With the spoils of their reckless gambit secured, Jax gave the order to retreat. The rusty nail pulled away, engines straining as the ship put distance between itself and the potential wrath of the alien retaliation. "Let's hope they stay down for a while," Ree remarked, her tone a mix of hope and skepticism. "Yeah, because hope has always been our strong suit," Lyra quipped, earning a chuckle from the crew. Jax leaned back, exhaustion setting in. "We did good today, folks. We might be a ragtag bunch of misfits, but we showed them what we're made of." Ezra nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And with this tech, we might just have the means to level the playing field." Jax allowed himself a moment of optimism, tempered by the knowledge that their path was still fraught with peril. But for now, they had survived, defied the odds, and come out on top. Not bad for a crew that specialized in narrowly avoiding death. As the rusty nail slipped away into the vastness of space, Jax felt a spark of hope, a rare commodity in their line of work. They had turned the tide, albeit temporarily, and with the newfound tech, they had the chance to build something greater. "Next stop," Jax announced, a grin spreading across his face, "finding out just how far we can take this." With a course set for a brighter, if not entirely certain, future, the rusty nail punched forward, engines roaring into the unknown. And for the first time in a long time, the crew dared to dream of a world where their luck would finally turn around. The rusty nail wobbled through the void like a drunk stumbling out of a bar, its engines grumbling in protest at the continued trauma being inflicted upon them. Captain Jax Hargrave lounged in the tattered command chair, a self-satisfied smirk glued to his face. The ship might have been a heap of scrap held together by sheer stubbornness and Thane's grease-laden expertise, but today it was a victorious heap of scrap. "Well," Jax drawled, stretching like a cat that just caught the canary. "We didn't explode, that's a win in my book." Lyra snorted from her station. "That's a pretty low bar, Captain. But hey, if getting shot didn't ruin our day, nothing will." Ezra leaned back, exhaling the tension that had been coiled in his shoulders like a nest of vipers. "We should celebrate. Maybe by not dying for another 24 hours. I'll pop the champagne," Reed chimed in dryly, "or whatever this excuse for celebratory alcohol is. I've tasted better cleaning fluid. Not like we have any actual champagne," Thane muttered, wiping his hands on a rag that was more dirt than fabric. "Unless alien tech can magically turn engine coolant into bubbly." "Worth a shot, though." Jax tapped a finger on his armrest, eyes scanning the control panel as if it might suddenly sprout legs and do the cha-cha. "We've got bigger fish to fry than booze. We've got tech now, real alien tech. The kind of stuff that could make humanity actually worth a damn in this universe. The kind of stuff that might make us more enemies than friends," Ezra pointed out, always the voice of caution. "We need to be smart about this," Thane snorted. "Smart isn't exactly our strong suit. Reckless, now that's more our style." "But seriously," Lyra cut in, all sarcasm aside for once, "what are we going to do with it? We could sell it, make a fortune. Or use it to actually improve things, maybe make some real change." "Change," Ree mused, rolling the word around like it was a bitter piece of candy. "It's a hell of a responsibility, thinking we could actually change something out there." Jax leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "What if we did, though? What if we took this tech and turned it into a game changer? Something that levels the playing field, gives humanity a fighting chance against all those who think we're just cosmic cockroaches." Lyra's eyes twinkled with a mix of hope and mischief. "Captain, are you suggesting we become galactic Robin Hoods, steal from the technologically rich and give to the poor?" "Why not?" Jax shrugged, his grin widening. "Besides, it'd be nice to be on the right side of history for once." Ezra raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "As long as history doesn't decide to squash us like bugs." "But hey, aiming for something better is more than most do." Thane crossed his arms, rough hands smudged with grease. "What's the plan then? Just sneak into some alien bazaars and start handing out tech like Space Santa?" "Not quite," Jax replied, leaning back and folding his hands behind his head. "We do it carefully, strategically. We find allies, build a network. Maybe even get Earth's leaders to pull their heads out of their asses long enough to see the bigger picture." "An optimistic outlook," Ree noted. "For us, anyway." Optimism's never been our wheelhouse, Lyra quipped, fingers already flying over her console as she pulled up star maps and data feeds. But then again, our wheelhouse is more of a wheel shack, never really stuck to the traditional methods, Jax shrugged. Guess it's time to build ourselves a new wheelhouse then, one that doesn't have holes in the walls. Ezra sat forward, interest piqued. We could start by analyzing what we've taken. If Thane and I can figure out the specifics, we can develop a plan, something that actually has a chance of not backfiring horrendously. Always good to steer away from horrendous backfiring, Ree agreed. Been there, done that, didn't even get a t-shirt. The crew settled into a new rhythm, each member focused on their tasks. Thane and Ezra disappeared into the guts of the ship, eager to strip the alien tech down to its molecular bones. Lyra continued her dance with the console, weaving data and signals into a coherent picture of their potential allies and threats. Ree organized what little supplies they had, muttering under her breath about the quality of their food rations. Meanwhile, Jax roamed the bridge, occasionally peering over shoulders and offering nuggets of unwanted advice. Careful with that, Thane, Jax called into engineering, where Thane had something that looked suspiciously like an alien coffee machine in pieces. We don't want to accidentally invent a new kind of killer cappuccino. Thane shot him a look that was more grease than man. If this thing makes espresso, I'm retiring. Maybe buy a beach house on some backwater planet. Yeah, Jax replied with a grin, we'll call it Café Rusty Nail. Bit of a niche market, but hey, someone's gotta like bitter coffee and existential dread. Ezra chuckled from his corner, surrounded by glowing holoscreens displaying streams of alien code. I think that's more of a lifestyle than a business model. As time slipped by, the crew worked in their usual synchronized chaos, each step bringing them closer to understanding the potential of their prize. The tension that had gripped them since the confrontation eased, replaced by a cautious optimism, an unfamiliar but not unwelcome sensation. In the mess hall, which doubled as a war room, they gathered to discuss their findings. A small holographic projection floated above the table, lines of alien script interspersed with diagrams and symbols. So, what are we looking at? Jax asked, eyes scanning the floating display. Magic beans or the golden goose. Ezra tapped a few buttons, bringing a specific section into focus. More like seeds for change. We've got propulsion tech that could make our ships faster than anything out there. Shields strong enough to turn attackers into confused stardust. And weapons, Thane added, though his voice was cautious. Though I'm more interested in the defensive capabilities. Offense gets you in trouble. Defense keeps you alive. Defense wins championships, Ree quipped, eyes twinkling with mischief. Or in our case, intergalactic wars. Lyra tilted her head, looking thoughtful. If we could improve Earth's defenses, maybe we wouldn't have to worry about some alien overlord showing up and deciding they want a new territory in the Milky Way. That's the dream, Jax nodded. But we've got to be smart. No point in painting a target on our backs if we can avoid it. Speaking of which, Ree interjected, who do we trust with this? We need to make sure it lands in the right hands. Jax leaned back, considering. We start small, reach out to the people we know, maybe a few scrappy crews like us, build a coalition. Something grassroots that won't get stomped before it starts. Thane rubbed his chin, smudging grease across stubble. Could work, but we've got to move fast. Word gets out and we'll have more than just aliens gunning for us. Then let's make it count, Jax said, resolve hardening his voice. We've danced with death and we've come out stronger. Now it's time to share the music. The crew nodded in unison, each person energized by the thought of their potential impact. It was a Herculean task they'd set for themselves, but they'd never been ones to shy away from impossible odds. All right, Jax clapped his hands, breaking the moment of camaraderie. Let's start reaching out. Time to see who's willing to join our merry band of misfits and rebels. Lyra's fingers flew over her console, sending encrypted messages out into the vastness of space. Each ping represented a hope, a fragile tendril reaching out into the darkness, seeking allies. We've got some contacts on the outer rim, she said, eyes flicking over the screen. Few captains who owe us favors. And a couple who might be interested just for the challenge. Not to mention the ones who just like sticking it to the man, Ree added with a grin. Always a few of those in the mix. Thane stood, cracking his knuckles. Let's get to work then. Got a lot of duct tape and hope to spread around. Ezra chuckled softly, the sound a rare but welcome addition to the ship's ambience. And if all goes well, maybe we can retire to that beach planet after all. Jax nodded, optimism tempered with a hint of mischief. Yeah, maybe we'll even get our hands on some real champagne. With renewed purpose, they set to work, each member of the crew contributing their unique skills to the grand vision they dared to conceive. It was a long shot, an uphill battle waged against the universe itself. But they were used to those, and truth be told, they preferred it that way. The rusty nail became a hive of activity, its systems buzzing with life and energy. Messages flew out to the corners of the galaxy, planting the seeds of revolution. the crew worked tirelessly, driven by a shared vision, by the tantalizing possibility that they could be agents of change. The days blurred into one another, a relentless cycle of planning, building, and outreach. It was exhausting, yet exhilarating, each small success a nail in the coffin of their previous lives of aimless drifting. Their coalition grew, a ragtag assembly of ships and crews, bound together by shared purpose and camaraderie. It wasn't much yet, but it was a start. The beginnings of something more than just survival, a chance to redefine their place in the cosmos. And as the rusty nail hummed through the void, its crew felt a spark of hope for the first time in ages. They were on the brink of something monumental, a chance to leave a mark that would echo across the stars. "Here's to change," Jax toasted one evening, raising a mug filled with something vaguely drinkable. And to the crazy idea that we might actually pull it off. The crew raised their own mugs in salute, each person acutely aware of the challenges ahead, but buoyed by the promise of a better tomorrow. "To change," they echoed, voices filled with conviction. And with that, they lifted their glasses to the stars, ready to face the future head-on.